So good afternoon. We start our panel. Our conference's title is Women of Faith, Women of Strength. And as we have seen over the last couple of days, a wide variety of topics was presented. This panel is meant to recap key learnings, to connect the dots, to point out areas of agreement and disagreement, and to look ahead. Where do we go from here? The participants on the panel are Sister Jane Wakahiu, a member of the Little Sisters of St. Francis of Kenya, is the Associate Vice President of Program Operations and Head of the Catholic Sisters Initiative at the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. She leads global programs to strengthen women religious congregations, focusing on capacity building and sustainable development. Sister Jane holds a PhD in Human Development and Higher Education Administration from the Marywood University. Before joining the Hilton Foundation, she was Executive Director of the African Sisters Education Collaborative, supporting education and leadership for over 5,300 sisters across Africa and the US. Dr. Ursula Stephens is the CEO of Australian Catholic Safeguarding Limited since June 2021, leading national efforts in Australia on safeguarding, child protection, and professional standards in the Catholic Church. She spearheaded initiatives like a new safeguarding portal to help Catholic organizations improve practices. Ursula also chairs the Fundraising Institute Australia's Code Authority, setting ethical standards in non-profit fundraising. She is a visiting fellow and director at Queensland University Technology's Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Non-Profit Studies. She served formerly as a senator for New South Wales and holds a doctorate in public administration. Gerry O'Connell is the Vatican correspondent and associate editor for America Magazine, a Jesuit publication out of America. He has reported on the Vatican since 1985 for outlets like The Tablet and the National Catholic Reporter. Joining America in 2014, he became its first full-time Vatican correspondent and opened its Rome bureau. Gerry has authored a number of books, for example, on the Papal Conclave. Based in Rome, he has covered 3 papacies and maintains a close relationship with many at the Curia. Father Romuald Uzabumwana is born in Rwanda, member of the Palatine Fathers. He studied spirituality and psychology at the Gregorian University. He was one of the first doctoral students in this field connected to our institute. His doctoral research was on the roles on religion among the survivors of sexual violence during the genocide in Rwanda, in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Belgium. He has been the president of the Conference of Major Superiors in Rwanda, a member of the General Council and the General Secretary for the Palatine Missions. Currently, he's a lecturer at the Institute of Anthropology and a member of the Ethical Commission for Vigilance at the Lateran University. The panel will run as follows. Each one of the 4, Sister Jane will start, then Gerry, Ursula, and Father Romuald will follow. Will present for 3 to 5 minutes his or her personal reflection and experience in regard to the general topic of the conference, with special attention to what they have discovered over the days of the conference. After their 4 statements, I will invite the panelists to engage in a conversation among themselves for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then for another about 30 minutes or so, we open the floor and invite for your questions and comments from the audience, which will address questions either to one panelist in particular or to all of you. When time is over, we will wrap up for the coffee break. But I would ask now Sister Jane to start with her reflections, and then you go on in the order as indicated.
Thank you very much for the hands and for the introduction. I begin with gratitude to you all for being here today, and for the speakers and presenters for your thoughtful, profound, and awakening stories and perspectives which you so graciously shared with us. You weaved hope into every story that you shared. There were stories for over 70 women who have experienced abuse, their dignity shattered, and their pain is still reeling. They are women of faith. They are women of strength. You are doing it, whether alone or others accompanying you. For me, the presentations that were aired today illustrate that the fight is not over and the journey is still long. I want to assure those who presented in these days we have been here, you are not walking alone. It's a conference for women, but I see men in the midst, showing we have allies to walk alongside us. We all have to work to build a culture of protection, dignity, well-being, and safeguarding that is embodied in every aspect of life, in everything that we do. This is not possible without thoughtful engagement that we saw here, lifting up models that work and that can be replicated into the realities of other countries, whether it is grievance redressal cell in India, Awake in the US, Skit in India. All these models can be replicated elsewhere. We are living in communities that sometimes, and institutions, and sometimes even families, where rigid and deeply ingrained traditional cultures serve as a barrier to becoming what God imagines of us. I reflected on my position as a listener and observer. How long would it take, and what is mine to do? These are real people enduring pain, shattered lives, broken trust, and challenges to love and trust again may not be easy. I could feel from their voices how lives have been altered. Some are still reeling with pain, others are on a healing journey, and others have wounds that are still open, gushing with pain and silently waiting for someone to hear them and waiting for someone to respond. I know I cannot repeat those stories, but I have a few reflections that I'm going to take away from this engagement. I could feel the story of Cain when God approached Cain and interrogated him, "Where is your brother?" And Cain responded, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Thank you to each of you, from philanthropic community, researchers, and practitioners who have been responding and being there being the keepers of our brothers. I will speak of what we have done as a foundation because that's what informs my own practice as I walk alongside sisters. And I feel encouraged by Henry Nouwen's quote in The Life of the Beloved. Happiness and inner peace come from giving ourselves to others. A happy life is a life for others. You all are giving your lives for others. Do not lose sight of doing so. I work at the Hilton Foundation, a man who started the Hilton Hotels philanthropy in 1944. And one quote moves me a lot. Charity is a supreme virtue through which the mercy of God is experienced in the world. As the stories were unfolding, I could see compassion, tenderness, mercy, love, commitment, and you can name it, of those who are accompanying, giving themselves in order to heal. Whether it's in Ukraine, in India, in Africa, and many other terrible situations and difficult situations. Mr. Hilton said, love one another, for that is the whole law. The peoples of the world deserve to be loved, never to be left to wander alone in poverty and darkness. In our mission of improving lives for vulnerable and disadvantaged disadvantaged conditions, our work is supporting those who are vulnerable, those who are experiencing disadvantage, but love is the way. So what we have done, and in responding to the questions that was asked this afternoon, we work alongside women religious around the world in supporting initial and ongoing formation programs in different contexts. We support education, and for over 20 years, that has been my job in different types of organizations. We work with organizations like International Union of Superior Generals. We support Conference of Major Superiors, whether it's in the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea, Africa, and even in some of the difficult countries. We know that when the formation is good, and when sisters are empowered, they can play the role of dismantling practices that continue to infringe them in their communities. We also support initiatives like working with Father Hans Zollner and IADC to provide sisters with opportunities to come here and get diplomas or get a licentiate so that they can return to their communities and build culture and practice of safeguarding, but also review formation programs that they are being offered and also can help in the governance structures. We are so glad that we were able to support this conference, and already it has elucidated so much and demonstrated so much promise of research and bringing practitioners and church to engage in these dialogues. The reason we prioritize support of formation and ongoing formation throughout life and integrating safeguarding culture in religious communities, where we've seen mental health issues and well-being of sisters under jeopardy. We have formed networks that are helping to bring sisters who have skill set in the same areas together to explore the best way they can support. Over 100 sisters who are counselors in Africa are accompanying other sisters. We have over 189 sisters who are lawyers and canon lawyers who are working alongside congregations to look at the policies, procedures, protocols, not only on safeguarding, but also documentation for their property and then even contracts for their jobs so that then they can be remunerated rightfully. We have programs in social entrepreneurship where we are supporting sisters to transform some of their ministries to social enterprises so that they can generate income and be able to support them, aware that some of the sisters are working in difficult conditions, not because they are in those spaces for money, they are in those spaces to accompany the people who are in those circumstances. As a result, they are not getting any salaries, but they need to sustain them. We are supporting sisters in looking at the issues of elder care because abuse is also happening in those houses. Whether it's recreating the house, whether it's those who are accompanying them, how are they supported so that then they can live a thriving life? We pay attention to the people of God and put in your path, if you want to discuss about the people, you need to provide and support them deeply in their communities where they live. I would beg to stop there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel a bit of an imposter here, because when Father Hans asked me to participate in this panel, I don't know how many months ago, I said, really, no. I said, these people are on the front line, I am not. And having listened to your talks, and I've listened to all of them, I've been really impressed. You've shown the many faces of violence that are in our world today, the multidimensional nature of violence. I listened with real interest to Sister Theodora. Spoke about the war in Ukraine. I had a particular interest in that because my wife was in Kiev the night the Russians invaded Ukraine, and she was there for many days with all the Russian tanks lined in front. Then I would like to summarize what I'm going to say in the 3 words that Lara of Awake said. She spoke about horror, humanity, and hope. And certainly, Sister Theodora explained some of the horror. I'd just like to add 2 other things that haven't come up here. One is the horror we're seeing in Gaza. We have 55,000 people killed since October 7, 2023. 20,000 of them are children. And I have here on my phone photos of girls, 4, 5, 7 years old, one with a bullet in her head, one here. How kids can be shot? This is horror. And we have people being shot, women, children, adults being shot as they go for food. This is another face of violence. And I think it's got eclipsed by this horror that we're living in the present moment. But you brought out many faces of violence. And there's another thing that I think didn't come out in relation to China. I don't know if you're aware that between between 2000 and 1980 and the year 2020, $30 million sex-selective induced abortions of female fetuses took place in China. That was under the one-child policy to eliminate young girls and women, young girls from being born. This got very little publicity. But this is part of the horror. Now, your stories, you've brought out a lot of the feminist side, and I counted so many in that speaker from Italy. She spoke about the feminist side. I don't know if you're aware that earlier in June, in the park very near here, a young child between 6 and 10 months old was found strangled, and the mother's body was found. The child was under a bush, and the police have now arrested the suspect in Greece. These are today's things. And the 2 children I spoke to you about in Gaza were in the last 2 months. Your talks brought out humanity. And we've seen the tremendous stories of humanity that have been done by Sister Nirmala with great courage, humanity and courage. We see the story of Sister Teresa of India also brought out these things. And this morning I listened to the 2 speakers from Africa, the sister from Togo and the speaker, not a sister, from Spain. These are examples of great courage and great humanity. What we've understood about Christian life is you cannot live the Christian life alone. You have to network, and that's what you're doing. You're building networks, and Father Hans has done tremendous work in trying to build this, because you've got to educate people. Why do people kill and feel justified in doing so? It's a question of basic education, I think, that goes right down to the schools. And then we saw the speaker from Italy. She was speaking about the pornification of the publicity. How do you attack this culture? I listened to the Sister Nirmala and Sister Teresa, and also this morning to Sister Mary, speaking about the church and how the resistance almost to accept the pleas from the victims, from the survivors, whatever word you wish to choose. And I was struck with one thing struck me. He spoke about how the culture of the family impacts on the young woman, the young girl, and how the reputation of the family is more important than the individual. And I thought, this is how the church operated. The institution was more important than the individual. It's almost 40 years now the church has been trying to combat the abuse question. So I will stop there with those points. I think horror, humanity, and courage. And really, you have shown very many examples of humanity and courage in the face of horror. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and can I also add my thanks and appreciation to not only the organisers and the facilitators, but certainly to all of the presentations that we've received over the last few days. They have been incredibly powerful. They have underpinned the theme of this conference of women in faith and women of strength. But what I've really heard in these presentations is that they are women of courage and that you are women of influence in actually addressing the abuse crisis that we continue to appreciate, to understand is happening in the world. So we did hear powerful case studies and stories, And I was listening as many started with a sense of the journey of the facts. So we started with stories of power imbalances, of coercive control, of cultural norms, of clericalism, structural powers, regulatory controls, lack of respect, commodification, objectification, subservience, abuse as a weapon of war. And then we heard some words. We heard escapees. And we started to hear those words of hope, which were profound examples of spinners and weavers and wefts and webs and nets and networks and alliances, collaboration, partnerships, and emphasising what Gerry just said, the critical importance of connection. So for me, I make two observations. The first one is we are all being called to a ministry of redemptive leadership. I think what we know is that our pastoral care is rooted in gospel teachings. And the most important safeguarding standard that we have is investment in leadership, governance, and culture. And this requires a shift away from the perpetrator-focused initiatives that became such a reactive response to inquiries and royal commissions that we've all experienced, so that we now need to be much more about supporting, providing support for those living with the experience of abuse, because that transformative approach to leadership emphasises healing and restoration and empowerment. These are the stories we've heard over the last few days, particularly in contexts that are marked by trauma, injustice or suffering. And it's rooted in the values that we've heard from all of you: compassion, integrity, humility, and a commitment to justice, and justice being seen to be done. So throughout the conference, we've actually heard some very powerful examples of redemptive leadership, seeking not only to guide and inspire, but also to redeem broken systems and uplift those who've been marginalised and harmed. And that approach is really crucial in supporting women who are victims of abuse in several ways. And these words have been repeated over and over again. The very first one is about creating safe spaces where we prioritise psychological and physical safety and foster environments where women feel secure and heard and supported. And then we've heard stories of empowerment and advocacy, where we actively work to empower survivors by advocating for their rights, amplifying their voices, and ensuring that they have resources such as counselling, legal aid, and shelter. And then, of course, we've heard about, rather than focusing on punishment, we are encouraging restorative practices, restorative justice, helping survivors to heal and rebuild their lives while addressing the root causes of their abuse. And we're modelling compassionate leadership by embodying empathy, integrity, and moral courage. Redemptive leadership sets a standard for others, challenging cultures of silence and complicity around abuse. And most importantly in our church, we are working for systemic change to transform our institutions and policies that perpetuate abuse or neglect survivors, promoting long-term cultural and structural change. And I've heard several calls within the conference and in our discussions, maybe we could start with updating canon law. Well, that would be a fine thing if that happened, wouldn't it? We can all wish. But in essence, redemptive leadership is not just about leading, it's about healing. It offers a powerful framework for supporting women who've experienced abuse, helping them to move on from victimhood to empowerment, and fostering communities where dignity and justice prevail. So, as we heard from Talitha Kum, safeguarding is actually a sacred duty. Trauma recovery takes time and healing can't be rushed. It needs patience. Importantly, I think the second message that I had was the powerful stories we heard that demonstrate that abuse perpetrates exclusion. The other, being on the outer, experiencing someone that no one can really understand. We heard lots of stories about that sense of worthlessness and isolation, suicidal ideation because they felt women feeling so devalued. Well, epigenetics shows us that trauma experienced by children impacts on their children. So we know that the recovery from trauma of abuse will be intergenerational. And I really have been thinking long and hard about the children that we've seen, the horror of the war in Ukraine, and the effect that that is going to have on the Ukraine nation for generations to come. Because by understanding that intergenerational trauma and the impact that it has, we can better support children and vulnerable people who've experienced abuse, not just in war, but also famine, sexual, physical, spiritual abuse, and of course we have so many in our Pacific region who are really being impacted in so many ways by climate change. And this is a new area of abuse of power that is going to be creating very traumatic experiences that we all need to deal with. But in this respect, I want to reflect on something that's a bit personal for us and the Australian delegation that's here at the conference. And let me give a shout out to so many people who've come from Australia to support the conference. We had Father Hans in Australia for a speaking tour in February, and I think that he inspired and galvanized many of you to be here today and to join in this really important conversation. So thank you for your commitment and being here. But I want to tell you about the First Nations people of Australia. This is a story you may not know, but the Aboriginal people in Australia were counted as fauna till 1967, when there was a referendum. And in that referendum, that was the first time that they were acknowledged to be people, the First Nations people of our country. And the first time that they were actually counted in our census was in 1971. Many of us were alive then. It's hard to believe that that could be the case. The first time they were counted and the first time they were registered and able to vote. So what happened in 2023, there was a referendum held in Australia, which was it was called the Referendum for the Voice. And the notion was that in this referendum, we were asked the question to acknowledge our First Nations people in our constitution. And it was a devastating outcome. The way in which it works is that every state and territory has to vote yes, has to get a maximum vote yes. And it didn't happen. And the devastation that that caused, the disappointment through the country was absolutely palpable. And I was thinking about this and just thinking about the sense of the psychological and spiritual abuse of that failed referendum for the Indigenous people of Australia. And these are people who had been forced off country and forced into institutions, and whole families had been split up during the early 20th century, and we actually had a whole reparation process for what were called the stolen generations. Children taken from their mothers and adopted out, sent overseas. This is a familiar story in other countries too, I know, including, of course, in Ireland. But these children have never found their families. They've never been able to get back to country. And what happened for us all was that their sense of rejection, that they were the other. It was an experience of those, it was a truly traumatic experience for our country so far. But what's happened since that time is that we have had really powerful redemptive leaders, such as Dr. Miriam Rose Ungunma Bowman, who was an Aboriginal Catholic teacher from the Northern Territory, an elderly woman. She was the Senior Australian of the Year, and she has just been leading responses to the failed referendum, which has been about deep listening sessions, healing circles, and the Healing Foundation. And so when I think about this and I think of the devastation that the Aboriginal people of Australia have experienced, I think, what is our call? And I think our call is to be humble, to walk alongside, to deeply listen, and to understand what we've heard throughout this conference, the important process of accompaniment. And as safeguarding leaders, women and men, our responsibility is to speak up, to speak out, to look with our eyes, to be safeguardians. Strengthening safeguarding culture isn't just about compliance. It is, as we say, safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So we all have a role to actually actively intervene where we see it's needed. So just in concluding, I want to say thank you to the brave women who allowed their stories to be shared in this conference, and for all of you who are working to accompany survivors of abuse. For some, the stories have been confronting, triggering and distressing. For others, they are their daily calling. And that is why you are such women and men of courage and influence. To encourage personal agency, remembering that cry, nothing for us or about us without us. That's the hope for future generations. That and eternal vigilance, I think, because complacency in our world is as complicit as silence. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you something on this topic. I will go straight to the point. I have 3 small points. First one is just to say the beauty, the grace, and the gift of being a woman. Saying thank you for the women who are here present, for the women who have decided to say yes to life, to the humanity, so that what we are today, we can be it, because a woman has said yes to life. This we have to not forget, to remember that the beauty of being a woman. Second point is the vulnerability of being a woman. Now I'm connecting to the presentation by Sister Theodora, talking about the situation in Ukraine. I was deeply touched by your situation because we had the same situation in Rwanda in 1994, where with the genocide, many women, according to the UN report, around 200,000 women, girls and women, especially from the Tutsi ethnic group, were raped. Rape was used as a weapon for genocide. So when you were talking, I felt really that there is something serious. Now, we have been here for 2 days and 3 days now. Far from this hall, women are continuing being raped, abused in different parts of the world where there is a war, armed conflict. We should not forget this. This beautiful hall is okay. This conference is beautiful, but let us open our eyes and our ears, understand for the women who are now, even today, are being killed, sexually abused, their dignity destroyed, not respected. Now, connecting to what Theodora shared, also, after I finished my studies in psychology, I went back to my country, and for 10 years, I was accompanying survivors of the genocide. Among them, there were women who were raped during the genocide. And those women, they suffered a lot. I spare you with the too much atrocity stories. And for more than 10 years, I have been accompanying them. What I think which struck me is their courage to come forward and to speak. And as you might know, it is because of their witness from those women from Rwanda that the UN decided to prosecute those who abuse, the rape as the genocide violence that was prosecuted for the first time. The first man who was prosecuted in the history was from Rwanda because of the testimonies of the women from Rwanda who dared to speak. Now, where do we connect with the faith? That's the third one. Safeguarding is possible, and we have to stand for. Now, for almost 4 years, I am in training safeguarding officers. I can say that's my personal experience. It is a journey, it's a process of conversion. Conversion, why? Because safeguarding is not the concern for women only. It is a matter for everybody, especially we men. Because the majority of people who abuse, they are men. And I feel bad when some men, they don't care about talking safeguarding or abuse because it seems as if it is not their own business. Let us stand for our sisters, our mothers, our friends, all the women. Because when a woman is safe, the society is safe, the family is safe, and the church will be safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That went a little longer than 3 to 5 minutes for each one. But we would like to give you now the chance to comment on each other's observation. If you have questions, if you have any further additions, what you would like to ask, what you would like to comment from what you have heard from among the four of you.
I have a question for Romuald. And the question really is about the AIDS epidemic in the African countries, and particularly in Rwanda, and how that has influenced safeguarding and protection for women who, having been victims of abuse, have contracted AIDS. Is that still an issue there?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Still, a number of women who have been raped during the genocide have got AIDS infection. And it was done purposely just to destroy their family, their ethnic group. Now, the government has tried a lot to help them to come out with the different programs, especially we have some support from United States and the UN organization. So we have done a lot to help those people who have been who are HIV positive. Now, there is a case I wanted to bring out that with the safeguarding, we don't use the expression safeguarding in my country because it is a new terminology. I have to be honest about this. But there is this helping those women who were HIV infected to come out, because being HIV infected in my country is a stigmatization. So people, they look at you as if you are strange, you have sinned. Now, those women, they come out and they feel accepted because the government is supporting them. And there is a case of one woman who participated into my research her name, she gave the permission to speak about her situation, Godelive Mukasarasi, probably you have heard about her. She is survivors of the genocide, survivors of the sexual violence during the genocide, and she's infected, HIV infected. Now, this woman, she founded an association, Sevota, helping other women to come out, to speak. And when they speak between themselves, they feel that I am not alone. I am with the others. And this is where this, the social dimension of therapy, of helping, is very important. Why? Now here I can quote Dr. Judith Herman, who said that when trauma, while trauma isolates, the group, the community welcomes. Now, those women, everybody was thinking that what happened to me is a shame. I feel shame, it's only for me. When they come together and share their own experience, this is have a powerful impact on the situation. Now, the government is supporting, and there is medicine they are made available, and yes, it's still a stigma, but they are not somehow isolated from the society.
I will add a little bit from what Father Romuald has said. For us, we are supporting the Conference of Major Superiors of Rwanda, because that trauma, sometimes it doesn't end with days, with years. It's a healing that needs to go deeper, and even trust of each other and walking alongside each other and those that they serve. So we do put resources so that the sisters there can have access to support. But I have a question for you, Ursula. You talk of the first people in your country. For years and years, they may feel left out. How do you accompany them, and what are signs of trauma that they may show?
Oh, that's a very good question. So the challenge, of course, and the reason why the referendum wasn't successful in the end was because there were many people who said, we don't know any Aboriginal people, because the traditional Aboriginal people live in the Northern Territory and on country in the regional and remote areas. And so the voting population is all on the populated coast. And people kind of said, well, we don't know Aboriginal people. And so the challenge for them was, the slogan, the anti-yes vote slogan was, if you don't know, don't vote no. And that became a very challenging outcome. But in terms of accompanying those, where we have the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Catholic Council. We have a beautiful Aboriginal Mass that's been approved by the Vatican. We have, in some of our remote communities, we have very strong cultural healing circles and healing groups, and the way in which we're able to reach them is often through our missionary sisters and missionary workers. But the church itself has got a huge commitment to our Aboriginal people and respecting their culture as the oldest continuous living culture on the planet.
I have a question to Gerry. Yeah, as a man of communication, how does communication can help in this project or initiative of safeguarding women? Because in many countries, people, they keep quiet, people they don't know. In some countries, we don't know what is going on. In some countries, there have been a research about abuse of women. Now, how can communication, social media, help in this project.
I mean, we've seen that the whole abuse question came out because of the media. Without the media, we would not be what we're doing today, I think. You think of Spotlight, but I think also the media plays a double role, because the things it does not report and the things it chooses to report. There's a certain I think, in fact, we're at a stage in the media, I think, where the eccentric, where the superficial is what attracts attention, what gets the clicks in the newspapers or in the... And so the more substantial questions often get reduced. You look on the television, often you have 2 minutes, if you're lucky, to synthesize a big story. And so it goes down also to, of course, who's paying the media and what levels of censorship are being introduced in the media and what topics they don't want to cover. And I know many of my colleagues, they sometimes have very good stories, but they say, that's not going to make news. And then if you look at the Catholic media, that's diminishing. So I think it's difficult. The media should be playing a big role, because what's come out from listening to these various talks here is the importance of education. Now, education starts in the family, and you've got a lot of broken families. What happens in the schools? What happens in the universities? What are the issues that are important? And you find that there's not the investment in helping, because you've got to change the culture. I mean, we're at a stage now, and we see it. We talk about justice, finding, and this came out in the talks, how do you bring justice to the survivors, to those who have suffered? Well, we're at a stage where almost to call for justice in some situations is rejected. I mean, look at the bigger questions. The International Criminal Court was set up after many, many decades working after the Second World War, and now you have something like the United States Congress wanting to sanction the judges for putting criminal charges against criminals. People who are committing crimes of humanity are responsible. When you see that happening, you wonder how the justice. And you talked about the Aborigines. I remember I was in Canada with the Pope, and the whole question of the Canadian, the schools, and the difficulty of getting justice for these people, even getting recognition. You speak about the importance of, and Sister Nirmala, several of the speakers spoke about the importance of breaking the silence. But how do you break the silence into the media? How do you break the silence into the schools? And the church itself, when it was protecting itself as an institution, didn't want the silence broken. I think one of the sisters this morning, Sister Mary, was talking about the Regina. When she went to the priest, he said, keep quiet. And too often this is happening. But the question is also, if you put a story in the media, is there a readership for it, or do people want to stay quiet? People don't want to be disturbed. You have to disturb consciences, and that's a very big challenge. And it's a very big challenge, and I've seen some of the very big media wanting to go for the superficial, the exotic, what will attract news. I don't know. You're a senator. You see this too in Parliament. How the difficulty of getting some of these questions addressed.
Gerard, I have a question for you, and it relates to a very recent case in Australia. So we have civil claims now being made against the church, and just this week there has been a ruling by the Victorian government that the church can be responsible for vicarious trauma for the families of abuse victims. And I just wonder what you think about the implications of that kind of a decision for the church.
The church, I think, has learned a lot in these years. I think there's a great growing awareness, thanks to also to people like Father Zollner, who's pushing. But I see also under Pope Francis, there was a real attempt to, okay, he admits he made mistakes in this field, but there's a real attempt to bring the issues out into the public domain. And his decision to put abuse victims on the Commission for the Protection of Minors was one thing. How many countries around the world actually do that? How many countries even have commissions? And it takes a long time. It's a question of changing the culture in the church as well as in society. And then there's fear. People are afraid to come out, to speak. People feel that they will be looked at strangely, and so that they're afraid. And the sisters was talking about in the communities, how difficult it is for other people, even in a religious community, to say, this is happening, let us talk openly about it. It's a very big question. How do you change the culture in the families? How do you change the culture in society? How do you change the culture in the publicity agents? Because I think there's a big lot that's not being attended to. And how do you change the culture in the media? It's a big challenge, and it's a challenge the church has. But the church itself has got to be united around what it's trying to do. And that's not easy. We see it in many countries.
Thank you very much. I think we conclude this moment now for the discussion among yourselves and open the floor to the participants. So whoever has questions or observations to any one of the four or to all, some of them, please come forward.
Thank you. I'm Sister Agnieszka, I'm from Poland, and I had a question to Ursula, but I think now it can be a question to all of you. Because you were saying about the systemic change, and I was exactly thinking about the culture, which is difficult to be changed. And exactly I'm thinking about the violence in the religious life and how you can break the silence, how you can Or maybe the question is, do you think that any policies can lead to a change of the system? Because I see the religious life as a subculture with own rules, mechanisms, dress code. And I see the resistance of this subculture and the resistance of sisters. They are not allowing me to enter, to talk with them about the violence, to help them. So is it possible that any policies or some structures would help, or how we can break this silence that you were saying just now? Thank you.
I'm not confident that I can answer your question, but I do think that the Universal Guidelines Framework gives us a starting point for conversations like that. Because if we take the framework and we take the principles that are there in the framework and we start to apply them in different cultural contexts, that does give us an opportunity to open up discussion around the kinds of challenges that you're experiencing. So I hope that that's a starting point.
I can add, maybe 10 years ago, we did not have a dissertation like Mary Rembo shared earlier today. And last year, she was with 60 sisters in Zambia, and she shared about her dissertation. What touched me is about the sisters who had agreed to tell their own stories of abuse. But when it came to the interviews, they said, I'm not going to participate, because that inner courage is not there. It is true, culture is so much ingrained in our ways of doing things, sometimes spoken and unspoken. But what I do believe, that this type of engagement we are having during these days, it's critical to giving people permission to speak about their own truth and their own realities. Last week, I was in Nairobi for a research conference for Global Research Network Symposium. One of the research among the 39 research papers that were presented, it was about monastic communities in 22 countries, and monasteries in 18 of those were interviewed. And the results of those interviews and the research was so much telling about what is happening in the monastic life: economic, emotional, psychological, and many other types of abuses. And when I spoke with the 5 of the leaders of different monasteries who were participating in the conference, the question they said, we know how to tackle this, and we're gonna work alongside each other if we have the resources to do so. Just that willingness and openness to conduct that kind of a study among the many, and being able to see it is in the formation, how we are forming, it is in the way we are living, it is in the economic way that we are supposed to care for ourselves. I think for me, it's peeling the layers one at a time, one of the layers at a time. It's what will change culture, but also telling stories about the real things that sometimes we cannot name. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I'm Father Emmanuel Chimombo from Malawi, but a PhD student at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa in Kenya. My question goes to Father Romuald. For cases of abuse, of sexual abuse, that result into pregnancy, the Catholic Church has a stand that pregnancy should not be terminated. Now, what do you advise in moments of counseling? Because even after the counseling, the lady has to bear the pregnancy and have a child, how do you help the lady to overcome the rape and then still see the result of that rape? That's a child who will grow in that community or in that family.
Thank you for the question. This happened that a woman raped bear the child. In the beginning, it's very difficult. In my research, 3 of them did not accept the child. After even giving birth, they said, this I can't accept. And they were even beating them. But slowly by slowly, using now what we call religious coping, faith, and also some teaching and also a therapy, they came to share with the other women and also talking with the, maybe in therapy, they came to realize that this child is innocent. I cannot kill the child. Now, those who wanted to abort, maybe it was too late to make the abortion, so they had no solution. Now, if somebody does not accept, has a difficulty to accept that the child, she can give that child in adoption, but not to kill the child.
This is Joan from Iraq. I have a question related a few unique contexts or scenarios. In a few political tension in a few countries where the Christians are at risk, so any safeguarding reported case, it might show as a threatening to the church, to the holiness of the church, and to the Christian identities in these high conflict or high tension countries. How do we ensure that still we guarantee the zero tolerance toward these cases and our decisions are more moral decisions, not political decisions, and we are not minimizing the abuse while we also don't mislead the truth? My second question is to the panel is, how do you usually overcome the conflict of values to protect the fairness? Even me as a focal point, I'm in safeguarding focal points. I usually tell my people that we cannot guarantee zero incident, but we can guarantee the zero tolerance, okay? So in anyone who sees us in a system of safeguarding, that means we are saying yes to what's happening, okay? Because the cases are still floating to us while we are part of the system. We are working in that area. So I would love to hear the panel answers on these 2 questions. Thank you.
I think the principle of zero tolerance being stated up front that this is the expectation of the church, is that there will be zero tolerance to abuse and that there are consequences to abuse and that those consequences are quite significant, is the first point. However, knowing that abuse occurs and continues to occur is really recognising cultural contexts, but also personal frailty, personal failings of those who are abusers, and that it's not a pure world. I think, I don't mean to be flippant about this, but I have a sense, you know, I'm a Leonard Cohen tragic. I don't know if you know who Leonard Cohen was, but he was a poet and singer, and he wrote about, he wrote a poem called Anthem, and it was, he basically says, God, I can't think of the line now, damn it. He says, he says, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And I think that what we are is that we're just blowing air into those cracks, and we're actually shining a light on what's going on in the church. And it's by shining that light that we actually can expose and help to change the culture. So, but in terms of the situation where Christians are in vulnerable circumstances because of not being in Christian countries, that is very challenging, and it just highlights the importance of interfaith dialogue and the work that the church, Pope has been leading work on this. There is deep academic work going on, but in terms of, I just despair about Gaza. It just makes me cry just to even turn the television on and see what's going on there, because it's wickedness. And I think in the wickedness, we just have to find some strength and hope that there will be an outcome, because that is just the destruction of a civilization and a whole nation, which is just devastating. So I'm sorry I can't really respond any better to you than that.
Anybody else who wants to or can reply to that? Sister?
I think I would respond about the zero tolerance. I come from a school of thought. This is a framework. Yes, it's zero tolerance. But when I go to the rural areas in South Sudan, they even don't know what zero tolerance is all about. There is not even structures and infrastructure. And I think we should be cognizant. How do we train people on the language we use and what it means in their own context? And then we talk about reporting. And I imagine in those situations where you travel 2-3 days and an abuse happens in those contexts, who do you report to? Where do you go to report? So sometimes there are words that we use in a particular context within the Western world that are not applying in some of other contexts. And for me, it's a deeper reflection of how do we translate some of the language within the context of culture, and what are the legal frameworks in those particular cultures that can help to address those kinds of issues, including culture, because sometimes it's working within the particular culture that you can set the norms and the values of why what is happening and what could be the consequences of some kind of behaviors. And I come from Kenya, though I live in Los Angeles. And I come from a very rural areas. And just a few weeks ago, I was discussing something with a friend, and she said, a girl who is experiencing disability was being abused by an older man. She doesn't know even that she should be reporting that whatever is happening between her and this particular man is an abuse. And only when women came forward and spoke strongly and called police officers, then 3-4 days later, the man was released because there was an agreement between him and the family. So when we talk about zero tolerance, this is not in a religious setting, but when we talk about zero tolerance, what is the context and what is ours to do? And those are spaces where we need also to bring safeguarding in the institution, safeguarding in the churches and faith communities, safeguarding in the local church, the local community, so that all of us are each other's keeper.
There was one more question here.
Thank you. I'm Rania from Egypt. So thank you for that. My question is coming from also our discussion in the morning, that we were speaking about it, how we can face the challenge of abuse and violence in the church, while sometimes in the canon law, there is some aspect is not going on with safeguarding. Thank you.
I'm not a canon lawyer, but they do say if you get 10 canon lawyers in a room, you'll never get an agreement anyway. But I do think that there is a time coming soon when there will have to be a reflection and a review of some of the text in canon law. And there have been, I think most recently in Chapter 6 was a few years ago, that actually clarified some of the definitions and extended the definition of abuse to take into account pornography and physical and psychological abuse. But it's not just that part of canon law that kind of makes it so difficult. It is the, and you know, we understand the hierarchical structure of the church, the complexity of the way in which our church operates, but there's a lot of embedded, what can I say, discrimination with the way in which canon law is both written and also how it's interpreted. And so it is a strong desire of mine that somewhere, somehow, we might actually get it reviewed.
I'm Shanti from Indonesia. If you did, how was the experience of handling the case of clergy perpetrators who was only transferred by their bishops? The clergy, I accompany some victims, and then one clergy already had rape trials, and another abortion 2 times, and another also concubinate for 9 years, and only transferred by their bishops.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your question. Can you try again?
Have you experienced accompany the victims and the case? The consequence for the clergy perpetrators is only transferred to another places, to another archdiocese by the bishops. The clergy itself, I'm a psychologist, I accompany some victims, and one victim has been rape trials by a clergy, and another have been already 2 times, abortion 2 times by the same clergy, and also another concubinate by another clergy for 9 years. And the clergy, all clergy perpetrators admit, all the clergy perpetrators admit all the mistakes.
Oh, thank you for such an important question. Unfortunately, I haven't had an experience like that. So our work is really around helping to embed a culture of safeguarding within the church in Australia, where we have accompanying victims and survivors of abuse. It is actually to bring them into, into contact with the religious institute or the diocese, who have their own processes of managing that. So I'm sorry that I haven't had that experience to respond.
Accompany victims by the same clergy, abused by the same clergy. Have you had any? Okay. So I haven't had an experience either, and I haven't been asked for a suggestion, but I would say, you are accompanying them. Is there a tribunal in that particular diocese or a process? When we talk about zero tolerance, mostly is called out within the policies of the diocese. who is the point person that you could speak to within that particular diocese, so that then, so that then at least this case can be listened to. I don't know, but that would be what I would do. Either look at who is in the tribunal, or whoever is in the, or whoever is, even going to the bishop, because, if it's the same clergy that is continuing to do this, I think it can have adverse impact, and maybe it's only the victim you never know whether there are other victims. But I don't work in the space per se, so I may not be able to offer much. Father Hans, maybe.
Thank you. No, I'm not going to answer this now, but we had one more question, and then I think we will wrap up for that session after this last question here.
Thank you. I'm Sara from Italy. And thank you, Father Romuald. I really appreciated your final sentence. When the woman is safe, the family is safe, the society is safe, and the church will be safer. My question is, practically speaking, what we can do as a society, as safeguarders, as a priest, religious, and lay people to ensure that a woman is safe and feels safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your question. I think, as Sister Mary said this morning, the first step is to talk about this awareness, that there are situations where our children, our women, our people, they are not safe. Now, when we know the risk factors of abuse in this society, and Sister Mary also has mentioned some of them, and in the class also we have mentioned some of them about these risk factors. So we have to open our eyes and go to the root cause of the abuse, not only talking from the theoretical level, but also from for example, the case you have been analyzing. This is a good procedure that people, they come to know what is going on. And after, we have to give space to the victims. Because people, if they know, we speak about abuse, people, and we have some victims and survivors, we have to give voice to them. We know what is going on. And later on, we have to set up this effective policy of safeguarding in every society. And for example, also starting by education, as Sister Mary said this morning. Education, for example, when you see small boys, how do they treat their own sisters in the family, for example? The woman in Africa, or in Asia, another country, what are her rights as a woman? We have to speak about this. There is something which I appreciate this morning when Sister Mary was talking, that, for example, if somebody has given something to me, has done something to me, let us say the case of a priest who helps a sister, and you feel as if saying thanks, giving this woman, this priest, means have sex with him. No. There is another understanding, and also changing the culture. If you bring safeguarding from above, from Rome, people, they will defend themselves. If you bring safeguarding from, books only, let us go, as Sister also Jane said, let us go to the root cause of the situation, go to the context, and establishing safeguarding policies, guidelines, but who are concrete in the situation. Because what is true here in Rome might not work well in Africa, in my country, or in another country. So, clear safeguarding policies, but contextualized.
So let us give a round of applause to our panelists.